Republican Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. He's a member of the Finance Committee and the Joint Economic Committee. And Senator, it is so great to have you here. Now, let me tell you, one of the main reasons it's great to have you here is we talk about fake populists that go to Ivy League schools. And while I was talking about that, I found out that everybody around the table today, including Lemire, who's a Columbia grad, also an Ivy Leaguer. But I checked your credentials. You're strong, my man. LSU all the way through. SEC.
Go Tigers. You might be a Florida or a Florida State fan, but the Tigers have been doing pretty well against those teams. Not Florida State, but Florida.
Well, I went to Florida Law School, but, you know, Senator, we have a rough first weekend in every November, you and me, because I'm a Bama fan.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Well, my wife's an Alabama fan, so I've learned to handle that well, but I've learned to handle it better the last couple of years.
Well, exactly. I went to Alabama undergrad. So, Senator, there's so much to talk to you about. I want to get to Social Security in a little bit, but let's start with the bank. It seems to me that a lot of bad decisions were made by the bank. At the same time, all weekend, I was hearing, I'm sure you were hearing too, a lot of investors really concerned about what would happen to other regional banks if, like, for instance, First Republic went down. What are your thoughts? Are we out of the woods yet, or do we still have a ways to go?
First, obviously, there's a lot of banks that are going to be exposed. A high inflation environment in which the Fed is trying to raise interest rates to catch up with them is exposing mismanagement. But as I was walking to the studio today, I passed First Republic. There is no line outside First Republic. It tells me that the people who have their money there have been reassured. That's an anecdote, of course, but metaphorically it tells us that the depositor is now okay. And the Fed's policy, which they tell us doesn't involve taxpayer dollars, seems to have been oil and water. So I am cautiously optimistic.
Well, and you say that's an anecdote. My gosh, the calls I was getting from California with all the lines around the First Republics and everything else, it was kind of frightening for a while. I am curious, how did we get back to this point, though? What are we now, 13 years after 2008? Did the regulators miss something with how Silicon Valley Bank was working?
Well, first, the fault has to first lay at management. Management knew that their investment strategy was ill-equipped to deal with high inflation, high interest rates. So first it's management. But could the regulators have imagined that as well? Absolutely. I'm told that people selling stock short, they sold the SVB stock short, and they made $500 million. So somebody out there knew that the bank was bleeding to death. So yes, the regulators did something wrong, but ultimately I think it's the high inflation, high interest rates that's going to expose mismanagement, not just at SVB, but at other companies as well.
And as Joe said, we'll be hearing from the president here shortly in a few minutes, and we'll take those remarks live. Senator, I want to talk to you about an issue that you've been pushing lately. It's Social Security solvency. And there's been chatter among some members of your own party about the retirement age perhaps should be raised here. Where do you think, what are your concerns right now about Social Security, and where do you see, what would your message be to American workers who are hearing this rhetoric? What do you think the retirement age should be?
Let's back up a little bit.
Sure.
Social Security is the Silicon Valley Bank of retirement systems. It is going broke in 9 years. And when it goes broke, by current law, if you're receiving a check right now from Social, that check goes down by 25%. You lose 1/4 of the income that you would have if we don't do anything. So we've got to step up and make sure that Social Security benefits are there for those who are getting it now and those who are going to be. The approach we're taking, the centerpiece, is to create a fund separate from Social Security, very separate from Social, and to allow an investment strategy which will grow over time and help Social. It'll bridge it to sustainability. It'll make Social stronger, it'll strengthen it, it'll secure it. So the main thing we're talking about in our approach is this investment fund, separate from Social, this investment fund that actually bails Social out. Everything else is just a dial. You can dial this, you can dial that. But the investment fund is that which is critical.
So President Biden, of course, is offering a very different vision. He just outlined his budget a few days ago. He's been extremely critical of plans put forth by your fellow Republicans in the Senate, one from Florida in particular, about Social Security, about Medicare. Where should those negotiations go? Do you think that Senator Scott's plan is the right one?
Senator Scott's plan is wrong. It is totally separate from our plan. And by the way, our approach, if you will, is bipartisan. And so bipartisan means that Democrats and Republicans are liking the framework, this kind of idea of a fund separate from social. But if somebody tells you that there's no need to address Social Security, they're either too old or too rich to care. President Biden needs to be honest with the American people. Social is going broke in 9 years, and when it goes broke, there's going to be a 25% cut. And what somebody who's currently receiving Social Security, they will get 25% less. So now, if he wants to pretend that we don't need to do anything, that means he thinks he's going to be out of office when it occurs. We need to step up now to protect the person who's relying upon social. In order to pay her bills, we need to start planning now.
So, Senator, a long time ago, when I was in Congress, we had to slow down the rate of increase of Medicare because the Medicare trustees said Medicare was going to go bankrupt in 7 years, going to go broke in 7 years. You're talking about 9 years. Are the trustees saying that Social Security runs out of money in 9 years?
Joe, absolutely. And they've been predicting this for 20 years. It's not like it just dawned upon us. It was going to go.
Can I just ask you? Can I ask you that real quickly? Because I must tell you, I could go back to 1994. I've been saying this since 1994. And I've been warning about deficits and warning about debts and warning about inflation coming. And at some point, people look at you as the boy who cried wolf. So if I've been warning about Social Security since 1994 and how we need to get rid, and nothing's happened, what do you say to those people who say, you guys have been saying this for 30 years?
Joe, when you said it was going broke, you didn't mean tomorrow, you meant in 30 years. So for 30 years, 29, 20, 15, 10, we've been warning. And now it's upon us. So we have a choice. Either we pretend there's no problem, like President Biden did during the State of the Union speech, or we say there is a problem. If we address it now, we can address it in a way which eliminates the possibility of a 25% cut in benefits for people who rely upon Social Security. We can also fix it in a way which makes it more fair for those who perhaps it is not quite fair for now. If we wait till the last minute, boom, it's going to be a car wreck. You're going to have to throw things together. It won't be nearly as well thought out. Let's do it now.
So how does your plan protect working class Americans? How does your plan help middle class Americans and people in Louisiana from feeling the crunch of having some of their benefits taken away?
The heart and soul of our approach is to come up with a fund separate from Social Security, which has a different investment strategy than does social. Now, by the way, there is no risk for the person working back home, that LSU Tiger fan. There's no risk whatsoever for her or for him. The risk will be borne by the fund. But you keep the fund going for decades, and you kind of, that way, the ups and downs of the market, you kind of level out. And at the end, if you do the math, we'll have enough in that fund that can pay off any debt accumulated in terms of making sure that everybody gets the benefits they're promised.
Well, this is fascinating. It is a bipartisan plan. Again, you're working with Senator Angus King. It's going to be fascinating to see how this develops. And Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, thank you. And I will say it today because you were kind enough to come in on set. Another SEC guy, go Tigers. That's the one time I'll say it, but go Tigers.